Hi, and welcome to Wealth Stories for Sleep. Here, the idea is simple. While you sleep, you grow richer. We gently send messages of abundance straight into your subconscious through calm stories made to gently guide you to sleep.
It was a cold and humid morning in the city of Elaron, a sprawling metropolis surrounded by gentle green hills and tall glass buildings that reflected the first rays of the sun. The clock at the central station marked 6:30 in the morning when Thomas slowly opened his eyes, still lying in his bed, covered with white sheets, slightly wrinkled. He remained still for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, feeling his slow breathing and listening to the distant sound of cars passing over the wet street. Then he stretched his right arm and turned off the alarm clock that played a soft melody. He sat up gradually, feeling the cool air touch his skin, swung his legs over the edge of the bed, and felt the cold floor under his feet, searching with his toes for his gray slippers. He slipped them on and walked to the bathroom while gently rubbing his eyes. When he switched on the light, he saw his reflection in the mirror and noticed the dark circles under his eyes. He leaned closer, opened the faucet, and let the water run for a few seconds before splashing his face, feeling the icy water awaken every part of him. He brushed his teeth slowly, staring at his own reflection, and then combed his hair with deliberate movements. Watching each strand fall into place, he took the hand towel and dried his face carefully, turned off the light, and returned to the bedroom. He walked toward the window and pulled the curtains open, letting the soft morning light spill across the room, illuminating the simple and tidy furniture. In the corner of the room sat his desk with a single notebook, a pen, and a small plant he cared for every day. He then made his way to the kitchen where the faint smell of fresh coffee greeted him. The coffee machine had been programmed to brew during the night. He picked up his favorite blue mug, poured the hot coffee, and leaned against the window, observing the city awaken, buses passing by, people rushing with umbrellas, and a light drizzle that still lingered over the rooftops. And as he watched, in silence, he thought about his life, the dreams he still held, and the things he had not yet achieved. And then the voice of the narrator emerged, soft and slow, speaking directly to the listener. Sometimes everything begins like this. On an ordinary day, in an ordinary life, when nothing seems extraordinary, yet the seed of change is quietly planted in the soil of your mind. If you learn to nurture your thoughts with gratitude and quiet determination, the invisible garden of your life will soon bloom with opportunities you cannot yet see. Thomas did not know it, but this was the first morning of a new chapter, one that would teach him that true wealth grows first in the invisible. Thomas placed the empty mug in the sink, rinsed it with water that felt warm on his hands, and then slowly walked to the small closet by the hallway. He opened the door and ran his fingers along the row of neatly hung shirts, most of them in shades of blue and gray. He hesitated for a moment before choosing a pale blue one. He slipped it on and buttoned it carefully, feeling the smooth fabric against his skin. Then he chose his black trousers and put them on with a slow rhythm. Adjusting the waistband, he walked toward the mirror in the hall and observed himself. For a long moment, he noticed the slight wrinkles on the shirt and smoothed them with his hands. He picked up his watch from the small wooden table near the wall, the ticking sound comforting in the morning silence. He strapped it to his wrist and took a deep breath. Outside the window, the drizzle had stopped, and the sun was beginning to pierce the thin clouds, painting the city with soft golden tones. He opened the apartment door and stepped into the corridor. The faint echo of his footsteps accompanied him as he walked to the elevator. The metallic doors opened with a gentle chime, and he stepped in. Pressing the ground floor button, the elevator hummed quietly as it descended, and Thomas watched the numbers light up one by one. The doors opened to the building lobby, and he was greeted by the scent of freshly mopped floors and the soft hum of a vacuum cleaner somewhere in the distance. He nodded to the doorman, who gave him a sleepy smile, and then stepped out into the bustling street. The air was fresh and carried the scent of rain mixed with city dust. He began to walk slowly, observing everything around him. The shopkeepers raising their shutters, a man feeding pigeons in the square, a child holding his mother's hand while pointing at the bright yellow buses passing by. Thomas felt an unfamiliar sense of presence, as if the world was moving slower just for him to notice its details. And then the voice of the narrator returned, calm and deep. Sometimes the path to prosperity begins with noticing the steps you take, the air you breathe, the beauty in simple things. When you become aware of the present, your mind opens a space for abundance. Thomas did not know it, but his awareness this morning was the first invisible brick in the foundation of the life he would build. One moment at a time, he continued walking, arriving at the park on the corner where he usually cut through to reach the main avenue. He paused near a bench and watched the drops of water slide down the leaves of the trees, sparkling in the sunlight. Like tiny jewels, he smiled faintly and closed his eyes for a few seconds, listening to the faint sound of birds hidden in the branches above. A deep sense of peace filled his chest. He whispered to himself words he barely understood, just a soft thank you, and then he resumed his walk, unaware that his quiet gratitude was already reshaping the course of his day. Thomas reached the main avenue where cars moved slowly in the post-rain morning. The wet asphalt reflected the sunlight like a mirror, and the sound of tires rolling through shallow puddles mixed with the distant honking of impatient drivers. He tightened his coat around himself as a soft breeze brushed his face. He crossed at the pedestrian light, feeling the faint vibration of the city under his shoes. Every step made a small splash, and he could smell the faint aroma of coffee drifting from a nearby cafe. He decided to step inside. The bell above the door chimed softly as he entered, and the warmth of the room wrapped around him. The smell of fresh bread, roasted beans, and vanilla filled the air. He removed his coat and draped it over the chair, then walked to the counter. A young woman with curly hair greeted him with a bright smile. He hesitated, scanning the pastries and the menu board, then softly ordered a cappuccino and a croissant, his voice quieter than he expected. He watched as she prepared the coffee, the steam rising in delicate clouds, the milk swirling in circles before settling into soft foam. He carried the tray to a corner table by the window and sat down, taking a small bite of the warm croissant, flakes falling onto the plate. He chewed slowly and stared outside at the passers-by, some hurrying, some laughing, some lost in their phones. And a deep thought began to bloom inside him. And that is when the narrator's voice returned like a gentle guide. Prosperity is not always loud. It starts in the small choices, the pause to taste, the decision to notice. It begins when you allow yourself to feel worthy of the warmth of the moment. Thomas took a sip of his cappuccino, the foam leaving a soft trace on his upper lip. He wiped it with a napkin and smiled faintly, for no reason other than that he felt alive. He watched an elderly man help a young child cross the street. Something about that small act of kindness made his chest feel lighter. He finished his coffee slowly, stretching the moment until the cup was empty. Then he stood, put on his coat, and stepped back into the city, the air cooler now against his face. He walked toward the office district where tall glass buildings reflected the clouds moving across the sky. He entered the building lobby, nodded to the security guard, K, and rode the elevator to his floor. The doors opened to the familiar hum of computers and the faint smell of paper and ink. He sat at his desk, booted up his computer, and for the first time in weeks, he felt no rush to check emails or answer calls. He just watched the monitor light up, breathing slowly, feeling a quiet shift inside. A soft alignment, like the pieces of his life were starting to settle in ways he could not yet explain. The narrator whispered again, "When you feel aligned, opportunities notice you, like birds drawn to the seeds you have yet to plant. They will come, just as surely as spring follows winter." Thomas did not know why, but he believed it, and for the first time, he believed he was worthy of it. The office day began with the quiet clicking of keyboards and the occasional ring of phones. Thomas adjusted his chair, feeling the soft leather against his back, and reached for his pen. He noticed how his desk was slightly cluttered with papers and a small potted plant that leaned toward the sunlight. He turned the plant gently so that all its leaves could bathe in the soft morning glow. He smiled at this simple act, then opened a document he had been postponing for weeks. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before finally beginning to type, slow and deliberate, each word carrying a weight he had not felt in a long time. Around him, colleagues moved, whispered, and sipped coffee, but for the first time, he felt separate from the rush, like he was sitting in the eye of a gentle storm. The narrator spoke softly. Sometimes prosperity is not about earning more, but about feeling present with what is in front of you. Wealth begins when you learn to give your full attention to this moment, and Thomas paused, letting the words sink in. He looked out the window and saw the cityscape stretching far into the distance. Sunlight glinting off car roofs, a bird landing on a nearby ledge. The day continued, and he worked steadily, taking breaks to stretch his shoulders, drink water, and glance at the clock without any sense of urgency. Hours passed, and finally, lunchtime arrived. He left the building and wandered toward a quiet park, his shoes tapping lightly on the pavement. The smell of grilled food from street vendors filled the air. He bought a simple sandwich and sat on a wooden bench beneath a tree. The breeze carried the sound of leaves rustling overhead. He unwrapped the sandwich carefully and took his first bite, savoring it as if it were a rare delicacy. Across the park, a group of children played tag, their laughter ringing like tiny bells. He closed his eyes for a moment and simply listened, feeling gratitude rise in his chest. The narrator returned. Gratitude is the soil in which the seeds of abundance grow. Every moment you appreciate expands the space for new blessings. Thomas opened his eyes and smiled again. He ate slowly, watching the sunlight shift as clouds drifted by. After lunch, he returned to the office, moving at an unhurried pace. He completed his tasks with focus and care, and when the workday ended, he packed his things neatly, tucked his chair in, and said goodbye to his colleagues with a genuine warmth that surprised even himself stepping outside. He felt the cool evening air and noticed the city changing colors as the sun sank lower. Lights flickered on in windows, and the first stars appeared faintly in the sky. He walked toward the bus stop, letting the world pass by in gentle rhythms. And deep down, he felt that something in his life was slowly, quietly beginning to bloom, unseen but real, like the first whisper of spring. Beneath the soil, Thomas stepped off the bus and felt the evening air embrace him with a soft coolness. He walked slowly toward his apartment building, noticing how the streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, casting pools of warm light on the sidewalk. His footsteps echoed softly as he climbed the short flight of stairs to the entrance. He greeted the doorman with a small nod and a smile, then made his way up to his floor, each step feeling like a quiet ritual. When he entered his apartment, the familiar scent of home wrapped around him. He set down his bag, removed his shoes carefully, and stretched his toes against the cool wooden floor. He walked into the kitchen and filled a glass of water, drinking it slowly as he leaned against the counter. The sound of the refrigerator humming was strangely comforting. After a moment, he decided to cook dinner, chopping vegetables methodically, feeling the textures beneath his fingers, hearing the crisp sounds as the knife moved, and smelling the subtle fragrances that filled the air. He stirred everything in a small pan, listening to the soft sizzling, and plated his food with care. Sitting by the window to eat, the city lights glittered like distant constellations. He chewed slowly, tasting every bite, and the narrator whispered, "Abundance begins in the mind long before it appears in the world." Each time you give full presence to a moment, you are planting seeds in the invisible garden of your future, Thomas. Thought of that and felt his chest warm with quiet contentment. After finishing his meal, he cleaned the dishes with deliberate slowness, letting the warm water run over his hands, and stacked everything neatly to dry. He then walked to the living area, dimmed the lights, and put on soft instrumental music. He lay down on the couch and watched the ceiling for a while. The shadows from the streetlights outside shifted gently, and he felt his body sink into deep relaxation. He imagined himself surrounded by golden light, as if every breath he took filled him with new possibilities. The narrator spoke again. Wealth is not a sudden storm. It is a gentle river that flows toward those who trust its path. Thomas allowed his mind to drift to the goals he had once abandoned, now feeling they could bloom again, slowly, like a tree that grows in silence. He rose and prepared for bed, brushing his teeth with calm movements, washing his face, and catching his reflection in the mirror. He saw the soft lines of fatigue around his eyes, but also a spark of hope that had not been there for a long time. He smiled faintly at himself, turned off the bathroom light, and walked into his bedroom, slipping under the cool sheets. He listened to the distant hum of the city, to the occasional car passing, and to the soft rhythm of his own breathing. And as his eyelids grew heavy, he felt, for the first time in years, that the invisible garden of his life was slowly starting to bloom. The morning light crept gently into Thomas's bedroom, filtered through the thin white curtains, and he stirred slowly beneath the soft weight of the blankets, his hand reaching out to the bedside table to touch the small alarm clock that was not ringing yet. He sat up and stretched his arms, feeling the satisfying pull in his muscles. Then swung his legs over the edge of the bed and let his feet find the cool floor. He walked to the window and opened it slightly. The air of the city carried a distant hum mixed with the faint smell of wet stone from the night's dew. He inhaled deeply and felt his lungs expand. He whispered a quiet thank you to no one in particular, maybe to life itself, and the narrator appeared softly, whispering, "Each new day is like a coin placed into your hand. Its value is chosen by how you decide to spend it." Thomas listened in his mind and nodded gently to himself. He padded into the kitchen, turning on the kettle for tea, watching the steam rise slowly as if time itself was stretching. He opened the fridge, took out a few eggs, and cracked them carefully into a pan. The sound of sizzling filled the small apartment, comforting and familiar. He prepared toast and sat at the little table by the window. The sun now spilling across the buildings like liquid gold, he chewed slowly, feeling every bite ground him. In the present, after breakfast, he washed the dishes, dried his hands, and walked to his small desk. Opening his notebook, the one he had begun writing in, after the first day he tried living differently, he wrote down 3 things he felt grateful for, then 3 things he wished to see grow in his life. Each word written like planting a seed in soil only he could touch. The narrator whispered again, "Invisible gardens grow faster than you think when watered with attention and gratitude." Thomas closed his eyes and imagined a stream of golden light pouring into his life, filling his home, his work, his dreams. Then he got dressed in quiet determination, putting on his shoes slowly, tying the laces carefully, as if sealing an intention with each knot. He left the apartment and walked toward the small park nearby. The trees greeted him with rustling leaves. A dog barked in the distance, and somewhere, a fountain trickled steadily. He sat on a bench and simply watched the morning unfold. People walking their dogs, a child laughing, an elderly couple holding hands. And he felt a sense of wealth in the simplest form, that of being alive and seeing life move around him. The narrator spoke once more. Real prosperity does not shout, it whispers. It arrives in small pieces until one day you realize your life is full of treasures you cannot measure in numbers. Thomas felt that truth settle into his chest like a calm wave. He stayed on the bench for a long time, breathing, watching, and silently promising himself to carry this awareness into everything he would do today. As the day drew to a gentle close, Thomas returned home. The golden glow of the setting sun stretching long shadows across the city streets. He walked slowly, as if each step was a quiet acknowledgement of the life he was choosing to create. When he entered his apartment, he removed his shoes and felt the cool floor beneath his feet. He set down his keys and went to the window, watching the sky shift from soft peach to deep lavender. The first stars beginning to appear like tiny promises. He boiled water for tea again and held the warm cup in his hands, the steam rising against his face, and he let his mind drift back to all the moments of the day, the small rituals, the quiet gratitude, the invisible seeds he had planted with his thoughts. The narrator's voice came in softly now, longer, flowing like a calm river. What you focus on grows. What you water with your attention and your gratitude blossoms in the unseen gardens of your life. Prosperity begins not with what you can hold, but with what you allow yourself to feel. Imagine that, as you close your eyes tonight, a gentle golden light surrounds you. It enters through the crown of your head and flows through every part of you, filling your heart, your chest, your hands, your legs, and finally, your feet. This light whispers silently that you are safe, that you are worthy, and that abundance is already on its way to you. Feel the weight of all doubts dissolving, and feel your body becoming lighter with trust. Imagine yourself walking through a garden filled with flowers you planted in your mind. The blossoms open one by one, each representing an opportunity, a gift, a moment of joy. Feel the air soft against your skin and the smell of growth all around you. And know that even in sleep, your subconscious is accepting the idea that you are allowed to prosper, you are allowed to receive, and life supports you in invisible ways. As the stars brighten outside Thomas's window, he sits in a soft chair and simply breathes, eyes half closed, knowing that everything he asked for is on its way. The narrator whispers again, "Tomorrow, your seeds will grow more. Tomorrow, you will wake with new clarity and new energy to live fully. And while you sleep, your mind will continue to open to prosperity, and your heart will become a magnet for the abundance you seek." Now take a slow breath in and out, and let your shoulders drop. Feel the gentle hum of the universe saying yes to your dreams. And if you are still awake now, let me know in the comments that you are still here. And if your eyes are heavy and your body is ready for rest, then let this gentle wave carry you into the deepest sleep. And if you are still awake, we can begin another story together, ready to guide you even further into peace and the quiet certainty of a life filled with invisible treasures. The snow had fallen gently during the night, covering the mountains like a soft white blanket, and in the quiet solitude of his small wooden chalet, Antoine, once a celebrated general, opened his eyes slowly to the pale light of dawn creeping through the window, the air inside cold enough that he could see his breath when he exhaled. He sat up on the creaking bed, feeling the weight of the thick wool blanket slide off his shoulders. And for a long moment, he simply listened to the silence, the kind of silence he had never known in his years of war and command. He slipped his feet into rough wool socks, then reached for his worn leather slippers, standing with a slow stretch that made his back pop softly. His reflection in the small metal mirror on the wall showed an aging man with deep lines on his face, a touch of silver in his hair, and eyes that once commanded armies now learning to command his own thoughts. He shuffled to the basin of icy water and splashed it on his face, gasping softly at the shock, then dried himself with a coarse towel. He looked at the few possessions he had brought to this mountain retreat. A wooden chair, a table with a single candle, a small notebook, and on the shelf the two books he held most dear now, a memoir of Napoleon's campaigns and a tattered copy of Affirmations inspired by Louise Hay. He opened the notebook and wrote slowly with a pencil, "I am building my inner fortress," the words shaky but filled with quiet determination. He moved to the small window and looked out at the endless snow and the frozen river below. And in that moment, the narrator whispers gently, as if speaking directly into the listener's heart, that there are battles only the soul can fight, and victory begins in silence. Antoine inhaled deeply, letting the cold mountain air fill his lungs, and he began his morning routine with the precision of a soldier, but the softness of a man seeking peace. He boiled water on a small stove, watched the steam rise, and whispered to himself affirmations of gratitude, thanking the universe for the simple shelter, for the breath in his body, for the opportunity to start anew. He ate a piece of hard bread, slowly, tasting it as if it were a feast, then sat cross-legged on a rug in the middle of the floor, closing his eyes to visualize a life of quiet prosperity, a life where his thoughts were soldiers marching toward victory. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and the day began in perfect stillness. The sun rose slowly over the snow-covered peaks, casting a pale golden light that turned the frozen river into a shimmering ribbon of silver. Antoine stepped outside, the old wooden door creaking as he pushed it open, and the crisp mountain air bit at his face. He pulled his coat tighter and walked slowly across the crunching snow to the edge of the slope. From there, he could see the small village below, smoke rising lazily from a few chimneys, and he felt both far and near, like an observer of life rather than a participant. He whispered to himself, as he had read in the tattered affirmation book, "I am safe, I am free, and I am ready to receive abundance." The words felt strange in his mouth, softer than the orders he had once shouted across battlefields, but he repeated them anyway. His breath turning to mist with each syllable, he returned inside and lit a small candle on the table, watching the flame flicker as he began to plan his day, just as he had once planned campaigns. Only now his war maps were mental landscapes, and his soldiers were his thoughts. He divided the day into quiet rituals, an hour of reflection, an hour of reading, an hour of walking, and an hour of visualizing the life he wanted. He began with the walk, stepping carefully down the narrow path toward the forest, listening to the crunch of snow underfoot and the occasional call of a distant bird. Every step was a meditation, every breath a command to his mind. As he walked, he remembered the chaos of war, the roar of cannons, the weight of armor, and he realized that prosperity was not only wealth, it was peace. It was the power to create silently without destruction. The narrator speaks softly now, almost like a friend at the edge of the listener's thoughts, saying that every mind is a battlefield and every thought is a soldier, and if you direct them with intention, you will conquer your life. Antoine stopped near a cluster of snow-covered pines, brushing snow from a fallen log to sit for a moment, closing his eyes and imagining not the cold and the solitude, but the warmth of opportunity, the invisible seeds of a future that would bloom because he chose to water it with faith. He pictured a spring where the river flowed free, the snow melted into fertile ground, and the villagers from below came to trade and share stories. He felt that vision as if it were real, and when he opened his eyes, the world seemed a little brighter, the candle of his inner fortress burning quietly against the wind. Days began to pass in a quiet rhythm, the snow slowly softening as winter leaned toward spring. Antoine would rise before dawn, the chill of the stone floor against his bare feet waking him completely. He would light the single candle on the table and whisper his affirmations into the still air. "I am ready to receive. Life supports me. Everything I touch prospers." And for the first time, he did not feel like a soldier following orders. He felt like a man giving life to his own inner army of thoughts. He dressed slowly, pulling on his wool coat and boots, and stepped outside to watch the first rays of sunlight climb over the peaks, mist rising from the river, as if the earth itself was exhaling. He would walk the same narrow path to the edge of the forest, noticing details he had missed before. The way frost clung to branches like tiny diamonds, the soft tracks of a fox crossing the snow. He found himself speaking to the trees as if they were old allies, telling them of his dreams and his gratitude. And though they gave no reply, he felt heard. The narrator enters softly, reminding that gratitude is the silent drum that calls abundance closer. Every thank you whispered into the world is a step toward victory in the unseen battlefield of the mind. One morning, Antoine stopped by the frozen river, kneeling to touch its icy surface. He imagined it flowing again, carrying pieces of gold and opportunity like drifting leaves. He closed his eyes and let the sound of the mountain wind become a choir for his thoughts. He pictured villagers smiling, the market alive, and himself standing among them, not as a general, but as a builder of something lasting. When he returned to his cabin, he began to work on small, deliberate tasks, carving wooden figurines from fallen branches, organizing the stones near his fireplace into patterns, even sweeping the floor with care as if preparing his life for guests he could not yet see. Each action was a signal to the universe that he was ready. In the evenings, he sat by the window with a cup of warm tea, watching the moonlight touch the snow. And in those moments, he felt a shift, like the air itself had changed. He noticed a bird he had not seen before land on the windowsill, its tiny claws tapping the wood, and he smiled, whispering to himself, "The first signs are always small." And he believed it, because within the silence, he could already hear the soft footsteps of prosperity approaching, as spring finally began to take hold. The snow retreated in slow patches, revealing dark earth and small green shoots that pushed their way toward the sun. Antoine noticed these tiny signs, as if they were medals pinned to the chest of the mountain itself. Every morning, he followed his ritual, rising with the pale light, breathing in the cold air, and repeating his affirmations with deliberate calm. "Everything I need comes to me at the right time. I am worthy of success. I am a magnet for good fortune." And each word felt like it planted a seed in the fertile soil of his mind. The narrator speaks softly now, reminding that repeated thoughts carve rivers in the mind, and like rivers, they eventually carry the flow of reality to the places we intend. Antoine spent hours repairing the fence around his small property, lifting each wooden post with care, hammering new nails while talking to himself about the life he was building. He began planting small rows of vegetables behind the cabin, imagining them already grown and abundant, as if his gratitude could water them as much as the spring rain. He walked to the river daily, now free of ice, and let his fingers drift in the current, feeling the cold, but also feeling the movement of life. One afternoon, as he returned from the forest with an armful of firewood, he saw two villagers at the edge of his path, an older man and a young boy. They waved hesitantly and asked if he might teach the boy how to cut wood properly. Antoine agreed, and for the first time in months, laughter broke from his chest as he watched the boy fumble with the axe before finding his rhythm. In the evenings, he began writing in a small leather notebook, recording 3 things he was grateful for each day. Sometimes it was simple: the sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of sunlight through the window, the taste of bread he had baked himself. Other times he wrote larger visions: a thriving garden, a workshop filled with creations, the quiet respect of the village. As weeks passed, Antoine noticed subtle changes. Animals seemed to linger near his home. The air felt softer, and neighbors began leaving small gifts at his door. Fresh eggs, a jar of honey, even a warm scarf. He never asked for anything, but he began to understand that by radiating peace and gratitude, he was already sowing prosperity. And the narrator whispers again, reminding that the invisible always blooms before the visible, that life bends toward those who prepare their hearts and minds for abundance. And Antoine, though he could not yet see the full harvest, felt in his bones that it was coming, just like spring always follows winter, without fail and without hurry. As spring finally began to take hold, the snow retreated in slow patches, revealing dark earth and small green shoots that pushed their way toward the sun. Antoine noticed these tiny signs as if they were medals, pinned to the chest of the mountain itself. Every morning he followed his ritual, rising with a pale light, breathing in the cold air, and repeating his affirmations with deliberate calm. Everything I need comes to me at the right time. I am worthy of success. I am a magnet for good fortune. And each word felt like it planted a seed in the fertile soil of his mind. The narrator speaks softly now, reminding that repeated thoughts carve rivers in the mind. And like rivers, they eventually carry the flow of reality to the places we intend. Antoine spent hours repairing the fence around his small property, lifting each wooden post with care, hammering new nails while talking to himself about the life he was building. He began planting small rows of vegetables behind the cabin, imagining them already grown and abundant, as if his gratitude could water them as much as the spring rain. He walked to the river daily, now free of ice, and let his fingers drift in the current, feeling the cold but also feeling the movement of life. One afternoon, as he returned from the forest with an armful of firewood, he saw two villagers at the edge of his path, an older man and a young boy. They waved hesitantly and asked if he might teach the boy how to cut wood properly. Antoine agreed, and for the first time in months, laughter broke from his chest as he watched the boy fumble with the axe before finding his rhythm. In the evenings, he began writing in a small leather notebook, recording 3 things he was grateful for each day. Sometimes it was simple: the sound of birds in the morning, the warmth of sunlight through the window, the taste of bread he had baked himself. Other times, he wrote larger visions: a thriving garden, a workshop filled with creations, the quiet respect of the village. As weeks passed, Antoine noticed subtle changes. Animals seemed to linger near his home. The air felt softer, and neighbors began leaving small gifts at his door: fresh eggs, a jar of honey, even a warm scarf. He never asked for anything, but he began to understand that by radiating peace and gratitude, he was already sowing prosperity. And the narrator whispers again, reminding that the invisible always blooms before the visible, that life bends toward those who prepare their hearts and minds for abundance. And Antoine, though he could not yet see the full harvest, felt in his bones that it was coming, just like spring always follows winter. Without fail and without hurry, summer arrived in the mountains quietly, with warm breezes that carried the scent of pine and the low hum of bees moving from flower to flower. Antoine now rose before the sun, standing on the small wooden porch of his cabin with bare feet on the cool planks. his breath slow and deep, eyes closed, as he repeated his morning affirmations. I am strong. I am deserving. I create my own fortune. And the narrator reminds us in a whisper that every word we speak to ourselves is a brick in the foundation of the life we are building. After his ritual, he washed his face in the cold river water, combed his graying hair, and dressed, simply feeling each small act as a form of respect for the day ahead. The garden he had planted months ago now thrived, and the sight of green rows swaying under the sun filled him with quiet pride. He carried baskets of vegetables to the village, exchanging them for flour, candles, and stories from the locals who began to see him not as the fallen general, but as a wise and humble man. One morning, the mayor of the village came to see him. A short man with bright eyes. He asked if Antoine could help organize the storage of food for the winter. Remembering his days of strategy and planning, Antoine accepted and carefully drew diagrams in the dirt with a stick, explaining how to rotate supplies and protect them from moisture and animals. The villagers listened with respect, and slowly he felt his role in the community growing again. One evening, as the sun melted into gold over the peaks, a young girl knocked at his door. She had a bundle of lavender in her hands and said her mother sent it to thank him for the extra bread he had shared. Antoine knelt to her level, accepting the gift as if it were a treasure, and the narrator softly reflects that giving and receiving are two halves of the same circle, and those who give from the heart always receive in unexpected ways. Days flowed gently into weeks, and prosperity began to show itself in subtle forms. Antoine noticed his cabin seemed warmer, the meals richer, laughter easier. Even the forest felt alive in a way it had not before. He had discovered the secret that Napoleon never spoke, and Louise Hay always whispered that the true battle is in the mind and heart. And when those are won, the world follows, like a loyal army, marching to the rhythm of inner victory. Autumn crept slowly into the mountains, painting the trees in gold, amber, and deep crimson. Antoine woke to the gentle chill in the air, his breath forming a soft mist as he opened the wooden shutters of his cabin and watched the valley stretch beneath the morning sun. He slipped on his worn boots, wrapped a wool scarf around his neck, and stepped outside to greet the day. Each leaf that fell at his feet reminded him that everything in life moves in cycles, endings feeding new beginnings. He began his morning ritual, as always, hands clasped behind his back, walking in slow circles near the garden while whispering his affirmations. I release the past. I trust the process of life. Abundance flows to me effortlessly. The narrator enters softly to remind us that repeating words with feeling is like planting invisible seeds, seeds that sprout first in the heart and only later in the world. After his meditation, Antoine carried a wooden bucket to the river. The cold water stung his hands as he filled it, but he smiled, grateful for the simple gift of fresh water. On his way back, he paused to watch a pair of deer at the edge of the forest. They froze, then slowly relaxed, as if they sensed his calm presence. He returned to the cabin, lit the small fireplace, and cooked a breakfast of bread, cheese, and warm tea, savoring each bite in silence. Later that day, the villagers came to see him, bringing apples, wool, and honey as thanks for his help in organizing the harvest storage. Antoine listened as they spoke of their hopes for the winter and their gratitude for the sense of order and safety he had brought. He felt a quiet pride, not the loud pride of a conquering general, but the soft glow of a man aligned with life. As weeks passed, he began writing in a journal every evening, recording not battles or losses, but blessings and affirmations, sometimes drawing little sketches of the valley or the villagers smiling. The act of writing each night felt like telling the universe, I am ready for more good things, and slowly he noticed that more good things came. The nights were colder, yet he never felt alone. He felt watched over by the mountains, the river, and even his own thoughts, which now had become his allies. The narrator reflects softly here that true prosperity is not about gold or titles, but about the peace you carry and the harmony you create. And when your inner world is rich, life has no choice but to mirror that richness in ways that surprise and delight you. Winter arrived in full, the mountains covered in white. The river slowed beneath thin layers of ice, and the cabin glowed warmly in the evenings as Antoine sat by the fire, tracing the flames with his eyes and thinking about the quiet transformation of his life. He no longer dreamed of battlefields or victories won through force. Instead, he felt the victory of having mastered his mind. Each morning he woke early, wrapped in layers of wool, and brushed snow from his boots before stepping outside. The air crisp and biting, the world silent except for the distant call of a raven. He whispered his affirmations into the frozen sky. I am safe, I am blessed, abundance surrounds me, and life supports me. The narrator steps in softly now to reflect, reminding us that when thoughts are aligned with gratitude and calm belief, even the coldest seasons bring warmth to the heart. Days pass slowly but peacefully. Antoine spent hours repairing tools, arranging woodpiles, and sketching the valley in his journal. When villagers visited, bringing stories of the town and laughter, he shared his bread and tea with them, and he listened more than he spoke. His silence had become his strength. Then, one evening, the snow fell in steady curtains outside. He sat alone in the soft flickering of the fire, and he felt it, a deep sense of prosperity that had nothing to do with coins or treasures. The narrator reflects here, speaking directly to you, the listener, that this is the secret he discovered. Prosperity begins invisibly in the quiet of your thoughts. It blooms in patience, gratitude, and in small choices that honor your heart. Your mind is the true fortress, and your beliefs are its gates. Every loving thought is a seed. Every moment of gratitude is water, and every act of kindness is sunlight. Let your inner garden grow. Let your invisible victories build your visible abundance. Breathe now, softly. Let the warmth of this truth sink into you. As your body relaxes and your thoughts slow, you are safe. You are supported. You are deserving. Abundance flows to you like snowflakes falling silently, covering the world in beauty. I wonder, dear listener, are you still awake? If you are, leave a comment saying you are still here. But if your eyes are heavy and you're breathing calm, let yourself drift gently. And if by chance you are still with me, then let us move into another story, deeper and softer, where your dreams will continue the journey toward your own quiet, unstoppable prosperity. In the heart of an old stone city, where the streets were paved with cobblestones, and the lanterns flickered with warm golden light at dusk, there stood an ancient library that seemed older than time itself. its tall, arched windows catching the last rays of the evening sun and reflecting them like pools of liquid gold. And inside this library worked a young woman named Elaron, who moved quietly between the endless shelves, her fingers tracing the spines of books that had seen centuries of hands turn their pages. And yet, she always felt that something was missing. A whisper of mystery calling her beyond the familiar halls she walked every day. Her routine was simple. She would rise each morning as the first light filtered through the small window of her modest stone apartment, stretch slowly, and slip her feet into soft, worn slippers. She would walk to the wash basin, splash cool water on her face, and study her own reflection in the small bronze mirror, noticing the faint shadows of fatigue under her eyes, but also a spark of curiosity that never seemed to fade. She would braid her long chestnut hair, tie it with a simple ribbon, and whisper to herself a quiet affirmation that she had started, saying after reading a fragment of an old manuscript, "Today I will find something beautiful. Today I will open my heart to wonder." And with that, she would step into the silent streets, her footsteps echoing softly against the stones, until she reached the towering oak doors of the library, where she would unlock the heavy iron latch, push the door open with both hands, and breathe in the scent of old paper, leather, and dust, the smell of knowledge waiting to be awakened. And as she lit the small oil lamps one by one, the library slowly came to life, shadows retreating into corners, books gleaming in the gentle light, and somewhere deep inside she felt that the library itself was alive, holding secrets that only the patient and the open-hearted would ever find. And as the hours passed with her sorting, dusting, and cataloging the endless tomes, she began to notice a draft coming from a narrow hallway she had never truly explored. A hallway lined with paintings of long-forgotten scholars, their eyes seeming to follow her as she walked. And at the end of that hallway, she found a small iron door almost hidden behind a tapestry. Her heart quickened. She hesitated, listening to the quiet hum of the library. And then slowly she turned the key she found resting on a nearby shelf. The door creaked open to reveal a spiral staircase descending into soft darkness. Her lamp flickered as she stepped down, the air cooler and filled with a scent of stone and time. And when she reached the bottom, she entered a circular chamber with walls lined in books. Yet all of the books were blank, their pages untouched, pure, waiting. She felt a shiver of awe and confusion. What were these books for, and why did they feel as though they were watching her in return? Then, as she stood in silence, she heard the gentle voice of the narrator speaking to you now, reflecting softly. Have you ever felt that your life is a book waiting to be written? That the words you think and the gratitude you feel are the ink that shapes your destiny? Perhaps like Elaron, you to hold a key to a hidden library inside your mind, a place where dreams and prosperity wait to be written, waiting only for you to believe. And as the thought lingers, the story drifts back to Elaron, who reached out and touched the first blank book, feeling a warmth rise through her fingertips. And before her eyes, faint letters began to appear, as if the book was writing itself. And her heart knew that her life was about to change forever. Elaron stood frozen, her breath slow and shallow, as the letters on the page shimmered into existence. Delicate as if drawn by moonlight, the words forming sentences she did not speak. yet somehow new, and they said, gratitude is the first ink of your life. For every thankful thought plants the seed of a story not yet told. Her fingers trembled as she turned the page, and another line appeared. What you imagine with joy becomes the script of tomorrow. She felt a strange calmness spread through her chest. Like the gentle warmth of a candle flame, she closed her eyes for a moment and whispered softly, "Thank you." And to her amazement, more words appeared, curling and flowing across the blank paper, and as she read them, she felt a quiet shift inside her, as though the library had unlocked a door in her heart. She stayed in that hidden chamber for hours, watching the books slowly fill with words. Whenever she focused on positive thoughts or memories of kindness, each memory, each dream, each hopeful vision for the future sent gentle ripples across the shelves of blank books, until faint words appeared on the spines, like titles waiting to be claimed by life itself. When she finally returned to her small stone apartment that night, the streets were bathed in the silver glow of the moon, and the sound of the river that ran through the city seemed softer, more peaceful. She entered her room, placed her lamp on the table, and sat by the window, staring at the sky. She remembered the words, "Gratitude is the first ink." And so she began to speak aloud the things she was grateful for. Her warm bed, the quiet library, the kindness of an old baker who always greeted her with a smile, and with each thank you, she imagined another page being written in the secret library. That night, she fell into a deep and serene sleep, and in her dreams, she saw herself walking through the hidden chamber. But this time, the books were glowing with soft golden light, and butterflies with translucent wings fluttered around her. She woke up before dawn, the air cool and fresh, and rose from bed with an unusual energy. She slipped her feet into her worn slippers, washed her face with cold water, and smiled at her own reflection in the bronze mirror, noticing that her eyes seemed a little brighter, the shadows lighter. She whispered again, "Today I will find something beautiful," and left for the library. As she walked the cobblestone streets, she noticed things she had ignored before. A small bird hopping along the edge of a fountain, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery, the soft laughter of children running with scarves trailing behind them. Everything felt alive and part of a bigger rhythm she was just beginning to hear when she reached the library. She opened the great oak doors and felt the familiar embrace of the scent of books, paper, and history. She lit the lamps slowly, letting the light stretch across the wooden tables, and walked straight to the secret hallway, her heart now beating with anticipation instead of fear. She descended the spiral staircase again and entered the hidden chamber, and this time the books were no longer entirely blank. Entire rows were now filled with the soft, golden script of her gratitude, her thoughts, her dreams. She ran her hand over the spines and felt warmth, as if the books themselves were alive and breathing. Narrator's voice returns softly now, asking you to notice that in life, the invisible work of your mind always precedes the visible bloom of your reality. Elaron was learning that every thought of thanks, every vision of joy, every whisper of prosperity in the mind writes its story in the world that is to come. And perhaps you too, as you listen, are writing in your own unwritten library, letting each calm breath be a line, each peaceful thought be a page, and each moment of faith be a chapter waiting to blossom. The next morning arrived, wrapped in soft golden light, the kind that spills through tall windows and dances on wooden floors. And Ilara woke up before the city had fully stretched its arms to greet the day. She sat on the edge of her small bed, her toes brushing the cold stone floor, and she whispered, "Thank you for this day," letting the words settle in the quiet room like a feather drifting slowly. She stood, slid into her long woolen robe, and moved to the wash basin. The water was cool, and as she splashed her face, she felt a fresh clarity blooming inside her, like morning dew on untouched grass. She combed her hair slowly, watching her reflection in the tarnished bronze mirror, noticing the calmness in her own eyes. Then she lit the little oil lamp, even though the sun had already begun to rise, because she loved the way the flickering flame made the walls feel like they were alive with a quiet pulse. She prepared a small breakfast of bread and berries, sitting by the window while the city outside came to life, carts rolling, birds calling, and somewhere in the distance the bell of a temple chimed softly, each sound a reminder that life kept moving, writing its invisible stories. After finishing her meal, she wrapped herself in a warm shawl and stepped onto the cobblestone street, the scent of baking bread and damp earth filling her senses. As she walked to the library, she silently repeated, "I am open to beauty. I am open to abundance." Like a gentle song only her heart could hear. By the time she reached the tall oak doors, she felt as though the world had already given her a gift. She pushed the doors open, the familiar hush of the library surrounding her like a soft embrace, the scent of old paper and polished wood instantly grounding her. She made her way to the main hall, her footsteps echoing lightly. And then she took the path to the hidden hallway, her fingers brushing the stone wall as if in greeting. The spiral staircase awaited, winding downward into the cool, secret chamber. When she entered, her breath caught in wonder, because the library of unwritten dreams had changed overnight. The golden script was not only on the spines now, but some books were glowing faintly from within, and the soft flutter of butterflies had multiplied, their delicate wings catching the glow, painting the air with silent light. Ilara approached a book that had her name shimmering on the cover, and when she opened it, she found scenes from her dreams and thoughts. The bakery with its warm bread, the fountain with the little bird, the secret wish she held in her heart. For joy and peace, she smiled through tears. And in that quiet, sacred space, she whispered again, "Thank you." And the words in the book danced in response. The narrator's voice drifts into your awareness, now soft and slow, reminding you that your mind is also a library, that every quiet gratitude and gentle belief is a page written in light, that when you choose to see beauty and abundance, the universe begins to fill in the details of your life, unseen at first, but inevitable as the dawn. And perhaps, as you listen now, with your eyes growing heavy and your breathing calm, you can almost imagine your own unwritten book filling softly with golden words, ready to bloom into your reality. The day after that, the city woke slowly under a mist that rolled through the cobbled streets like a whispered secret. And Ilara stirred beneath her quilt, blinking against the soft light filtering through the tall arched window of her small stone apartment. She stretched her arms, feeling the warmth of the blanket leave her shoulders, and whispered, "I am grateful for this morning." Her voice, a hushed melody in the stillness. She slid her feet into soft wool slippers and rose, the floor cool and grounding beneath her steps. She washed her face with water she had left in a ceramic bowl overnight, the droplets gliding down her cheeks like tiny blessings. And she stood for a moment, staring into the old bronze mirror, tracing her own reflection as if seeing a new story slowly forming in her eyes. She brushed her hair carefully, each stroke deliberate, a gentle ritual of preparing her mind as much as her body. She pulled her shawl around her shoulders and opened the window. The air was cool and smelled of wet stone and distant fires. She watched the city begin to wake, a baker sweeping his doorway, a boy chasing a stray chicken, a soft fog wrapping the rooftops, and she closed her eyes just to feel the life of the city, pulsing and alive beneath the mist. After breakfast, she made her way to the library, walking slowly, savoring each step, each stone, each faint echo of her footsteps. She whispered to herself as she walked, "My life is filling with quiet miracles, and I am ready to receive." The streets began to brighten as the mist thinned, and when she reached the grand oak doors of the library, she paused, pressing her hand to the wood. Feeling its silent strength, she stepped inside, the familiar cool hush greeting her like stepping into the softest part of a dream. She crossed the main hall, polished floors gleaming in the dim light, and descended into the secret staircase with her lamp flickering golden along the stone walls. The hidden library was waiting, and today it glowed more brightly than ever. Books shimmering in soft light, butterflies drifting like fragments of a dream, and a new detail caught her eye vine with tiny white blossoms creeping along the shelves. Its fragrance delicate, almost unreal. She reached for a book she hadn't seen before, its cover a deep midnight blue, and when she opened it, the first page slowly formed a picture of a sunlit meadow, though she had never seen one like it. And words began to appear. Your thoughts are planting seeds. Your heart is watering them. Your patience is the sun. Elaron sat cross-legged on the cool floor, holding the book, tears blurring her vision as she realized the library was responding to the garden she was quietly growing in her mind. Then the narrator's voice drifts in softly, reminding you that your inner garden is always listening, that every thought is a seed, and when you choose love, gratitude, and vision, your life begins to bloom quietly, invisibly at first, until one day you wake up and the air is filled with butterflies, blessings, and abundance. And as you listen, feeling your eyes grow heavier, you can almost sense your own library of unwritten dreams waiting, each page glowing, ready to write the story of the life you deserve. The next morning arrived with the sky painted in muted gold, and Elaron awoke to the sound of distant bells echoing softly across the old city. She opened her eyes slowly, savoring the warmth of her blanket, and let her gaze travel to the ceiling, where soft rays of dawn created dancing patterns of light. She whispered to herself, "I am thankful for another day to dream," and slowly sat up, her body moving with a kind of gentle pace that made her feel like she was already inside a dream. Her feet slid into her slippers, and she walked to the washstand, lifting the small porcelain pitcher and pouring water into the basin, the rippling sound calming her mind. She cupped her hands and splashed the cool water on her face, Feeling awake, yet serene, she looked into the old bronze mirror again, noticing how her eyes seemed brighter, carrying a quiet confidence she hadn't seen in years. She brushed her hair with long, slow strokes, each movement deliberate, as if brushing away any thoughts that no longer served her. Then she draped her shawl over her shoulders and brewed a small pot of herbal tea, the steam rising like whispers of encouragement. She took a sip, tasting chamomile and honey, and thought about how the simplest acts were now filled with intention. After a few moments, she left her apartment and stepped onto the cobblestone streets. The city was wrapped in a soft hush. Only a few vendors were setting up their stalls, arranging bread, figs, and herbs. She greeted them with a nod, walking slowly toward the library, her mind repeating affirmations. I am ready to receive. My dreams are blooming. My life is unfolding in perfect harmony. By the time she reached the grand oak doors, the sun was spilling golden light across the facade. She touched the carved wood before entering, feeling the deep hum of history within. The walls, and when she pushed the doors open, the air was cool and fragrant with old paper. She walked across the hall, every footstep a gentle echo in the cavernous space, before descending to the hidden staircase, her lamp flickering softly. In the secret library, the light had changed. Golden dust swirled like tiny stars, and the vine of white blossoms had grown further, draping itself over the shelves. Butterflies with iridescent wings floated gently between the books. She approached the table where she had left the midnight blue book, and it now had more pages filled. She opened it and saw an illustration of herself standing in the secret library, surrounded by light, the words slowly appearing on the next page. Every moment of gratitude writes a new chapter in your life. Every loving thought builds the walls of your future palace. She ran her fingertips over the letters, feeling as if the pages pulsed with life. She looked around and realized that more books were starting to glow. The blank books were filling, quietly, invisibly at first, but undeniably real. She sat on the cold floor and closed her eyes, imagining her dreams as already alive, already blooming. She whispered her gratitude into the stillness, and the narrator's voice enters softly, reminding you that your story is already being written in light, that every seed of kindness and gratitude you plant in your heart is shaping a future full of prosperity and quiet joy. And as you listen, your eyelids grow heavy, your breathing slows, and you begin to feel the pages of your own life turning gently, carrying you toward the abundant life your heart has always known was waiting. The following day unfolded under a gentle drizzle, raindrops trickling softly down the tall library windows, making the golden light shimmer like liquid honey. Elaron awoke to the soft tapping of the rain and the distant sound of a horse-drawn carriage rolling along the cobblestones. She stayed in bed for a few moments, listening to the rhythm of the water. Feeling a sense of comfort and security, she eventually rose, slid her feet into her slippers, and wrapped a thick knitted shawl around her shoulders. The air was cool and damp. She shuffled to the small wooden table where she prepared her morning tea, letting the steam rise into her face like a warm whisper. As she stirred honey into the cup, she quietly spoke to herself, "Every drop of this day will bring me closer to my dreams. Every thought I choose will write my story." After a slow sip, she opened her small window, letting the soft scent of wet earth and rain-soaked herbs flow inside. She closed her eyes and breathed in. Then she combed her hair slowly, tied it into a low braid, and looked at her reflection in the bronze mirror. Her face seemed peaceful, almost luminous, and she smiled to herself as if meeting an old friend. After dressing, she left her apartment with an umbrella. The city looked like a painting under the rain, rooftops glistening, puddles mirroring the pastel sky. The street vendors had covered their stalls with cloths, but the smell of warm bread and spices still drifted through the air. She greeted an elderly flower seller who handed her a small sprig of lavender, and Elaron tucked it into her shawl pocket. The walk to the library felt timeless, each step slow, deliberate, with her mind repeating, "I am abundant in thought. I am surrounded by invisible blessings." When she reached the library, raindrops dripped from the massive oak doors. She pressed her hand against the wood for a moment, then entered. The hall was cool and dark, except for the warm glow of candlelight. Her footsteps echoed softly as she approached the hidden stairway, descending into the secret library, where the air felt alive with whispers. She gasped gently as she saw the transformation. The vines of white blossoms now covered an entire wall, their petals glistening as those sprinkled with morning dew. And the blank books were no longer blank. Delicate golden words appeared on their spines. Titles like "The Garden of Silent Blessings" and "The House That Gratitude Built." She touched one and felt warmth, the energy of hope flowing into her hands. She sat at the table and opened her midnight blue book, seeing a scene of herself standing in the rain with her umbrella, smiling, and a caption forming, "Prosperity blooms in the heart that is willing to believe before it sees." The narrator's voice enters softly, telling you that, like Elaron, your thoughts are the architects of your unseen library, that every act of gratitude and every positive word you whisper is painting invisible pages with the future you desire. You feel your body relaxing deeper, your shoulders softening, your breathing slow and steady, and your mind sinking into a place of quiet trust as the rain outside continues its lullaby, inviting you to drift closer to sleep, safe in the knowledge that your inner library is already filling with golden stories. That night, Elaron returned to the secret room with a candle in her hand, its flame flickering gently against the stone walls. The air was calm and warm, carrying the sweet scent of the white blossoms that now filled the space. She placed the candle on the central table and sat in the wooden chair, tracing her fingers across the books that were no longer blank, each title glowing softly in gold. She opened her midnight blue book again and saw new pages written with the story of her day. Every small act of gratitude and every positive thought had become a line, a paragraph, a chapter. She read slowly, smiling to herself, and then she closed her eyes, imagining her dreams taking root like seeds in a secret garden inside her heart. The narrator's voice enters gently, slow and calming, telling you that this is the power of your own mind. Your thoughts are the ink. Your gratitude is the hand that writes. Your belief is the light that makes the words shine as you listen. You can feel yourself floating in a warm ocean of safety and abundance. The voice continues, reminding you that prosperity always begins unseen, in the quiet soil of your imagination, before it blossoms into your reality, like Elaron's library. Your life is waiting for the stories you choose to write. Each positive thought planting a new chapter of success. Each whispered thank you, opening another page as you rest. Imagine the pages filling with golden letters, writing your future with love, wealth, and calm certainty. Feel the peace of knowing that even in silence, even in sleep, your mind is creating the life you desire. You are safe, you are loved, and you are abundant. Now take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, release any worry. Feel your body soften, your eyelids heavier, your breathing steady and relaxed. Let the whisper of the narrator guide your subconscious. I am worthy of prosperity. I am open to receiving abundance. I am grateful for the blessings that flow to me now. Imagine this echoing gently through your heart like soft music, over and over, writing itself into the story of your life. Now, the narrator smiles in his voice and says, if you are still awake, leave a comment that says, I am awake, so we know you are here. But if your eyes are closing, if your breathing is slow, then let this story carry you. And if you are awake, let's continue to another story together. But if you are asleep, your dreams will write the rest of the pages for you. And the voice fades into the soft rustle of pages turning, carrying you into deep, calm sleep. Asterisk. In a quiet European village nestled between rolling hills and blanketed in soft winter snow, an elderly watchmaker named Elias lived in a small stone house at the corner of a cobbled street. Every morning, he woke up before the church bell rang, stretching slowly in his wooden bed. Feeling the warmth of the wool blanket against his skin, he would sit up, slip his cold feet into his worn leather slippers, and walk carefully across the creaky floorboards to the wash basin where he splashed his face with cold water that made him gasp softly. He reached for the small bronze comb on the shelf, combed his thin white hair, and looked at his reflection in the old mirror, noticing the gentle wrinkles around his eyes and the calm kindness in his gaze. Then he smiled too, himself, as he whispered good morning to the day. In his small kitchen, the smell of firewood and old pine filled the air. He boiled water in a copper kettle and made a simple tea. Sitting by the frosted window where he watched the villagers slowly begin their mornings, a baker sweeping snow. From the shop door, a young boy carrying a bundle of firewood, and a dog chasing its tail. After finishing his tea, he entered his workshop, a small room smelling of oil and old wood, lined with clocks of all shapes and sizes, each ticking softly, their rhythms blending into a soothing symphony of time. It was in this room that he first noticed the hidden clock tucked behind a dusty crate, unlike the others. This clock had a golden face with no numbers and delicate crystal hands. He lifted it carefully, feeling its unusual weight and a faint warmth in the metal. He placed it on his workbench and wound the key gently. Yet the hands did not move. Puzzled, he adjusted the gears and springs, yet nothing changed. Later that evening, as he sat quietly reflecting and imagining his little shop filled with new customers and laughter, he glanced at the golden clock and saw its hands move for the very first time. Just a single tick. His heart jumped. He whispered, "Perhaps this clock listens to my thoughts." The narrator's voice enters softly here, telling you that in life, the rhythm of our days often follows the quiet beats of our thoughts, that the clock of our inner world begins to move when we align with gratitude and abundance. And as you listen, you may feel your own inner rhythm slowing down, your breathing soft and calm. Then the story continues. Elias spent the next morning testing his theory. He woke early again, brushed the snow off his doorstep, prepared tea, and sat in his workshop with the hidden clock before him. He closed his eyes and thought about how grateful he was for the simple joys in his life, the warmth of the fire, the laughter of children outside, the gentle ticking of his clocks. And when he opened his eyes, the golden hands had moved again, this time 2 ticks forward. He laughed softly, realizing that his positive thoughts were winding the clock forward, and that perhaps time itself was bending to the harmony of his mind. Outside, the snow fell gently, coating the village in white, and the sound of distant church bells echoed as Elias felt a quiet sense of wonder at the magical connection between thought and reality. The next day, Elias awoke before the first hint of sunlight touched the frosted glass of his bedroom window. He lay still for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the wind outside and the occasional creak of the old beams above him. Then, with a deep inhale, he pushed the blanket aside, slid his feet into his slippers, and stood, slowly, feeling the cool wooden floor under his soles. He walked to the wash basin, splashed his face with icy water, and rubbed his eyes until they felt awake. He took his time brushing his thin white hair, straightening his back, and smiling gently at his reflection in the mirror, noticing that the soft lines on his face seemed lighter this morning. In the kitchen, he brewed his tea and leaned against the window frame, watching the village slowly awaken. A farmer guided a small cart of hay down the snowy path. A woman, carrying bread baskets, greeted a neighbor, and the distant sound of the church bell chimed softly as the sun stretched over the horizon. When he stepped into his workshop, he felt a deep stillness, as if the entire room was holding its breath. The golden hidden clock sat on the workbench, glowing faintly in the morning light. He approached it, placed both hands gently on the table, and closed his eyes. He whispered words of gratitude, thanking the day for arriving, thanking the warmth of his small fire, the softness of his slippers, the laughter he could imagine echoing in his shop. He pictured people visiting, smiling, leaving with clocks that brightened their homes, and as he let these thoughts fill his chest with quiet warmth, he opened his eyes and watched the golden hands of the clock tick forward 3 times. A wave of calm joy washed over him. The narrator's voice flows here, softly, like a breeze, reminding you that your mind is the first builder of your reality, that when you choose to focus on gratitude and imagine prosperity, life begins to align its rhythm with your thoughts. Your own inner clock starts ticking in harmony with abundance. And as you listen now, you may feel that subtle alignment within yourself, a slow, soothing sense that your life is gently moving toward what you desire. The day continued with Elias polishing old clock cases, tightening tiny screws, and arranging his tools with care. Every few moments he would pause to focus on a happy thought, a vision of abundance, and each time he did, the hidden clock ticked forward again. It became a quiet game between his heart and time itself. By evening, he lit a candle and sat watching the soft flame dance in the shadows of his workshop. He thought about the next day, how he would greet it with even more gratitude, and as he drifted into reflection, he whispered, "If my thoughts move time, then my heart can move the world." Outside, the snow fell silently, covering the village in silver peace, and the hidden clock glowed gently as if approving his dreams. The morning arrived with a pale golden light spilling through the small round window of Elias's bedroom, and he stirred slowly, savoring the warmth of his blanket before letting the cool air of the room touch his face. He took a deep, calm breath, then sat up carefully, sliding his feet into his slippers. He stood and stretched his arms toward the ceiling, feeling the familiar pull in his shoulders and the gentle cracking of old bones. He shuffled toward the small wooden table, poured water into the basin, and washed his face, the cold droplets waking his mind completely. He then brushed his few strands of white hair and observed himself in the mirror. The soft wrinkles around his eyes reminded him of the countless mornings he had witnessed in this quiet village. In the kitchen, he prepared a slice of warm bread with honey and brewed his favorite herbal tea. Holding the cup in both hands and inhaling the soothing aroma before taking a slow sip, as he moved to the workshop, he could hear the snow crunching lightly beneath the boots of the first villagers passing outside. The soft chime of the church bell floated through the crisp morning air. He opened the workshop door and was immediately greeted by the faint golden glow of the hidden clock resting on his workbench. He approached it reverently and placed his hands on the table, whispering his morning gratitude, thanking the warmth of his home, the gift of his craft, and the quiet beauty of the snow-covered world. He imagined customers walking in with joyful smiles. He imagined the laughter of children playing outside while their parents admired his clocks. And as he held that image with gentle certainty, the golden clock ticked forward twice, and a subtle warmth spread through the room. The narrator enters softly, here, speaking like a distant friend, reminding you that life responds to your inner rhythm, that the invisible seeds of gratitude and positive thought are already writing the story of your days. And as you let that idea settle in your mind, you may feel your own sense of time slow down, soft and patient, aligned with quiet prosperity. Elias spent the afternoon repairing an old pendulum clock brought by a neighbor. He cleaned each gear carefully, polished the brass until it gleamed, and smiled to himself when he noticed that as he thought of abundance and joy, the hidden clock seemed to hum faintly, its hands moving with his happiness. By evening, he sat in his favorite chair, sipping the last of his tea while the candlelight flickered against the walls, and he whispered softly to the room, "Tomorrow will bring new blessings. I can feel them already outside." The snow continued to fall, covering the streets in white serenity, and in the workshop the hidden clock glowed a little brighter, as if answering his heart. The next morning came with a soft gray sky, the kind that made the village look as if it were still dreaming. Elias woke up slowly, blinking against the dim light filtering through the small round window. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and felt the cool wood floor under his feet. He reached for his slippers, then took a long stretch, his arms trembling slightly from the effort. He murmured a quiet good morning to himself, as he always did, before shuffling toward the basin to wash his face. The water was cold and refreshing, droplets sliding down to his chin, waking him fully. He brushed his thin white hair, noticed a soft shadow of tiredness beneath his eyes, and smiled anyway, because he had learned to greet his reflection with kindness. In the kitchen, he lit a small fire in the stove, spread jam on a piece of bread, and brewed fresh tea. He leaned against the wooden counter, holding the cup in both hands, inhaling the soft scent of chamomile and honey, and allowed himself few quiet moments to visualize the day ahead. He imagined someone unexpected walking into the workshop, bringing a story, bringing an opportunity. And as that vision became clear in his mind, he felt the first spark of excitement in his chest. He stepped into the snowy streets, the soft crunch beneath his boots filling the silence. Villagers waved gently, their breath visible in the cold air. He opened the workshop, and the faint, golden glow of the hidden clock welcomed him again, its hands frozen where they had stopped during the night. He sat at the workbench and placed his palms flat on the table, breathing slowly, letting gratitude move through him like sunlight, thinking of the warm fire, the taste of honey, the beauty of the silent village. He imagined the quiet abundance of life, opportunities flowing like a gentle river, and the clock ticked once, the sound echoing softly in the room. The narrator enters quietly, like a thought carried by the wind, reminding you that even when life feels still, the seeds of prosperity are growing in the unseen. Your thoughts are the hands that turn your hidden clock. Elias spent the afternoon fixing the delicate mechanism of a traveler's pocket watch, his fingers moving with patient precision, the gears catching the light like tiny suns by evening. He placed the watch in the traveler's hand, and in return received a small bag of golden coins and a loaf of warm bread. He felt a wave of gratitude as the hidden clock ticked again, slowly, steadily, and he whispered to himself that everything was flowing exactly as it should. Outside, snowflakes danced through the soft glow of the lanterns, and the little village seemed wrapped in peace. The morning sun rose timidly, casting pale ribbons of light across the frost-covered window pane. Elias stirred under the heavy blanket, listening to the faint creak of the wooden beams above his bed. He let out a slow breath and whispered his morning gratitude before even opening his eyes, thanking the warmth of his home, the safety of the night, and the promise of another day. He finally sat up, letting his feet touch the cold floor, and slowly reached for his slippers. He stood, stretched, and shuffled toward the basin, splashing his face with icy water that made his skin tingle. He brushed the few white hairs on his head, noticed how the winter light caught the soft wrinkles around his eyes, and smiled. He went to the kitchen, placed a kettle over the small stove, and sliced a piece of yesterday's bread, spreading it with honey while the water boiled. He cradled his cup of tea in both hands, closing his eyes and inhaling the calming aroma. And in that moment, he imagined that all the abundance he wished for was already present. He pictured new clocks filling his workshop, customers smiling, opportunities flowing as naturally as the river beyond the village. He stepped outside, snow crunching beneath his boots, and walked toward the workshop. The small golden clock waited on the workbench, silent but glowing faintly. He touched it gently, letting gratitude rise in his chest, and whispered, "Thank you for another day." As his thoughts aligned with quiet prosperity, the hidden clock ticked softly, its hands moving forward with a sound like a secret only he could hear. He spent the morning cleaning the gears of an old cuckoo clock, the smell of wood and metal mixing in the air. The village bell rang once in the distance, and he paused too, breathed deeply. The narrator comes here like a soft wind, reminding you that the pace of life follows the rhythm of your thoughts, and that by tending to the invisible garden of your mind, you are already shaping the abundance to come. Elias nodded slowly to himself, feeling that truth in his heart. In the afternoon, a child knocked on his door, shyly, carrying a broken toy. "Watch." He invited the child in, repaired the toy with gentle care, and gave it back. Watching the child's face light up with joy after the child left, the hidden clock ticked 3 times in a row, and a warm, golden glow filled the workshop. Elias whispered a soft thank you, feeling the quiet current of prosperity moving all around him. That night, he sat in his favorite chair, sipping the last of his tea as the snow fell silently outside. The hidden clock ticking in perfect harmony with his peaceful thoughts. The night had passed in serene silence, and the village awoke under a blanket of fresh snow, soft and untouched, like a page waiting for its story to be written. Elias rose slowly from his bed, feeling the stiffness in his knees as he swung his legs to the floor. He paused to take a deep breaths and whispered his first words of the day. "Thank you for another chance." His bare feet slipped into worn slippers, and he shuffled to the small window, tracing a circle on the frosted glass with his finger. Outside, smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the frozen river glimmered like silver under the pale sun. He washed his face, combed his thinning white hair, and buttoned his wool coat before stepping outside. The cold air bit at his cheeks, and he walked carefully to his workshop, each step leaving crisp footprints in the snow. He unlocked the door. The hinges creaked softly, and the familiar scent of wood, oil, and time greeted him. He set his gloves aside and approached the golden clock. It sat there as though waiting for him, still and quiet. Elias placed both hands on it, closed his eyes, and let gratitude bloom inside him. He imagined the village thriving, his heart at peace, and abundance flowing to him like the endless river in spring. And the clock responded with a faint tick. He smiled softly. The day passed in slow rhythm. He repaired a grandfather clock for the baker, tightening screws and polishing wood while the gentle smell of bread drifted in from the street. He paused often to breathe deeply, letting the simple happiness of the moment fill him. The narrator returns here, like a quiet thought in your own mind, reminding you that your inner world sets the rhythm of your outer life, that your thoughts, like gears in a clock, turn and align with what you believe, and that prosperity is simply the echo of a peaceful mind. Elias looked toward the golden clock, which now pulsed softly with golden light, and he whispered, "Thank you." In the late afternoon, a soft knock on the workshop door brought him to his feet. An elderly neighbor stood with a box of old watches, asking if he could repair them. Elias welcomed her inside, offered her warm tea, and they spoke of the quiet beauty of the falling snow. He promised to restore the watches, and as she left, the hidden clock ticked steadily, faster now, as if life itself had decided to move in harmony with his gentle gratitude. Evening arrived with orange light melting into the snow outside. Elias sat in his chair, holding the ticking golden clock in his hands, and for a long time he listened to its sound like a whisper of the universe, promising that everything he aligned in his mind was already on its way. Night descended upon the village like a velvet curtain, the snow glittering faintly under the silver moon. Elias sat in his workshop, the fire crackling softly, and the golden clock resting in his hands. Its ticking now, steady and calm. He closed his eyes and let the quiet wrap around him like a warm blanket. The narrator enters now, gently, as though speaking inside your own mind, reminding you that life moves at the rhythm of your thoughts, that every worry slows the gears of your existence, and every thought of gratitude, of abundance, and of quiet certainty moves them forward. Elias leaned back in his chair, whispering, "Thank you," to the empty room. He thought of the neighbors smiling, of the village thriving, of opportunities flowing like a river that never freezes, and he felt the clock pulse in his hands. The narrator continues, softly guiding you, telling you that your mind is a garden, and each thought is a seed, that if you plant seeds of faith, of prosperity, of calm belief in your own worth, the hidden clocks of your life will begin to tick. In your favor, doors will open, help will come, and wealth, in all its forms, will flow toward you naturally. Without struggle, imagine now, as Elias does, that you hold a clock in your hands, and every tick is a signal from the universe aligning your path with success. Every tick is a reminder that you are safe, supported, and worthy of everything you desire. The fire crackled and cast golden shadows on the walls, and Elias let himself drift into a calm smile. The narrator whispers one last reflection, reminding you that gratitude is the key that turns the gears of time, that love for your own life is the oil that keeps them smooth, and that faith in your unseen prosperity is the spring that pushes your dreams forward. So take a deep breath now, feel the rhythm of your own life, and allow your mind to release every tension, every doubt, because this is your time to align, to receive, to rest. If you are still awake, leave a quiet note in the comments to say that you are here, listening to the ticking of life with me. And if your eyes are heavy and your mind is floating, let yourself drift into sleep, because if you are still awake, and let us continue to another story, where your inner world writes the chapters of your future wealth, your peace, and your quiet happiness. The morning sun stretched slowly over the sleepy coastal town, painting the cobblestone streets in shades of soft gold as the sea breeze carried the scent of salt and distant fish markets, and somewhere seagulls cried lazily over the rooftops. In a small, crumbling house near the end of a narrow street lived Elias, a thin, quiet man with a beard touched by gray and hands stained with old paint. He woke up early, as he always did, to the sound of the waves hitting the rocks, and for a moment he lay in bed, staring at the wooden ceiling beams, feeling the weight of another day that might look exactly like the last. He stretched his arms, sat on the edge of the bed, and slowly slipped his feet into worn sandals that had once been white but were now the color of the sea sand. He rubbed his face, feeling the roughness of his unshaven chin, then shuffled to the small bathroom where a round mirror hung slightly tilted. He saw his own tired eyes staring back, the faint shadows of sleepless nights beneath them, and he took a deep breath before splashing cold water on his face. The water dripped down his neck, and he whispered softly, almost like a secret to himself, "Today, I open new doors." He boiled water in a dented kettle and poured it over a chipped cup with a tea bag floating in it, the steam warming his face as he inhaled the familiar scent. He stood by the small window of his kitchen, watching the streets wake up. A fisherman walked past, whistling, carrying nets over his shoulder, and a woman opened the wooden shutters of her bakery, letting the aroma of warm bread float into the air. Elias sipped his tea, then carefully packed his old satchel with brushes, small jars of paint, and pieces of chalk. He wrapped a half loaf of bread in cloth and slid it into the bag before stepping outside. Locking his crooked door behind him, with a faint metallic click. He walked through the cobblestone streets, the early sunlight reflecting on the tiny puddles left by the morning tide, and the sound of the waves was like a soft drumbeat in the background. Children ran past him, barefoot, laughing, and one of them pointed and giggled. There goes the door painter. Elias only smiled, a soft, patient smile, as he made his way toward the old part of town where stone walls leaned like tired old men and ivy crawled across forgotten facades. He stood in front of a tall, cracked wall that faced the harbor and set his satchel down. Slowly, methodically, he unpacked his tools, laying each brush carefully on a folded cloth, mixing the paint in little jars, feeling the familiar joy rise inside his chest. He touched the wall, feeling its rough texture beneath his fingers, and closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he saw a grand wooden door, painted deep blue, with a golden handle that shone in the sun. He could almost feel it opening, letting light pour through. Under his breath, he whispered, "Every door I paint opens to abundance. Every door I paint brings beauty to this town. Every door I paint brings new life." He dipped his brush into the blue paint and began the first stroke, slow and steady, like the start of a heartbeat. Hours passed in a rhythm of brush against stone, the occasional call of a seagull, and the faraway laughter of the market. People walked by, some frowning, some shaking their heads, muttering that Elias was a fool to paint doors that led nowhere. But Elias didn't hear them, or if he did, he smiled to himself, repeating in his mind that every stroke was a promise. As the sun climbed high, the sea glittered, and the wind grew warmer. Elias sat on the ground, leaning back against the wall to admire his work. The painted door looked almost real, a door that someone could open if they dared to believe in it. He tore a piece of bread, chewed slowly, and drank water from his flask, watching the shadows shift across the stones. The narrator's voice now drifts softly into the story, like a whisper in the wind, saying, "Sometimes we create doors that no one else can see, and at first the world may laugh, but in the quiet repetition of our vision, reality begins to bend toward our belief. The first step to prosperity is always invisible. It starts in the mind, in the silent faith of your own hands." And with that, Elias stood up again, dusted off his trousers, and returned to the wall, his heart steady, his mind filled with quiet. Affirmations, and his brush ready to open another door that only he could see for now. The following morning arrived, wrapped in mist, soft and silver, rolling in from the ocean like a blanket over the sleeping town. And Elias opened his eyes to the dim light filtering through the small cracks in his wooden shutters. He lay still for a moment, listening to the faint creak of the beams above and the distant cry of seagulls, feeling the cool air against his skin. He slowly sat up, stretching his arms wide until his shoulders popped, then swung his legs over the edge of the bed and slid his feet into his old sandals. He shuffled across the cold floor, each step echoing softly in the quiet room, and he paused before the mirror again. His reflection looked the same as yester-tired eyes, sun-weathered skin but when he smiled softly to himself, whispering, "Another door, another day of abundance." He swore his face seemed just a little brighter. He splashed cold water on his face, combed his messy hair with his fingers, and let the chill wake his mind as he whispered 3 times, Every door I paint opens my life to prosperity. In the kitchen, the small kettle hissed as it heated water for tea, and he leaned on the window frame, looking out into the misty streets, which seemed like they were floating in another world. A fisherman passed again, pushing his cart silently through the fog, and Elias nodded in greeting. He took his cup of tea, inhaled the steam deeply, and imagined the scent as the fragrance of new opportunities blooming unseen, much like the doors he painted. After finishing his drink, he packed his satchel, tucking in his brushes, paint jars, chalk, and the piece of bread he had saved from the day before, then stepped out into the quiet street. His footsteps echoed softly against the cobblestones, and each step felt like part of a rhythm, a silent march toward a vision only he could see. When he arrived at the wall by the harbor, the mist made the painted door look almost magical, like it was real and waiting for someone brave enough to try opening it. Elias smiled, feeling warmth in his chest, and whispered to himself, "They will see it soon. They will feel it soon." He knelt on the damp ground, set his tools in a careful row, and dipped his brush into fresh blue paint. The first stroke of the day felt like greeting, an old friend, slow and deliberate, as if he were stitching a dream into the fabric of reality. Birds perched on the rooftop above, tilting their heads as they watched him work, and a stray cat patted silently behind him, curling up in the corner to nap. As he painted, he thought of the doors he wanted to open in his own life opportunities. Friendship, a spark of recognition from the town that had long dismissed him as a quiet, wandering fool. He whispered affirmations softly, letting them dance with the rhythm of the waves. I am creating beauty. I am creating prosperity. Every stroke brings life to me and to this town. Hours passed, and the fog slowly lifted, revealing the sea, glittering in the noon sun, and people began to walk by. Some stopped, squinting at the painted door, and one child ran up, pressing her small hands against the wall, giggling as if she could feel something humming there. Elias only smiled, knowing that the invisible becomes real first to those with open hearts. The narrator's voice floats in again, soft and reflective, saying, "Life is like these doors, quiet and unseen at first. Prosperity does not arrive with fanfare. It arrives in small strokes, in thoughts repeated with faith, in silent mornings where you choose to believe in what only you can see. If you hold the vision long enough, the world will reshape itself to match the picture in your mind." As evening approached, Elias cleaned his brushes, carefully placing each one back in his satchel, and he leaned back against the wall to look at his work. The second door was nearly complete, this one green with a delicate golden frame glowing under the soft light of the setting sun. He smiled to himself, feeling his heart full, knowing that tomorrow he would return, and perhaps, just perhaps, someone else in the town would begin to see what he saw. The next morning began with the sound of soft rain tapping on the roof of Elias's little house, a rhythmic whisper that felt almost like a lullaby trying to pull him back to sleep. But he blinked slowly, rolled over, and stared at the wooden ceiling beams, watching the shadows dance in the flickering morning light. He listened to the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks and inhaled deeply, smelling the faint aroma of the ocean mixed with wet earth. Slowly, he sat up, swinging his legs off the side of the bed, his toes brushing the cool floor as he reached for his old sandals and slipped them on. He stretched his arms high, yawned, and muttered softly to himself, "Every new day paints a door to abundance." His voice was quiet, but it filled the room with a strange sense of purpose. He walked to the small wash basin, splashed his face with cold water, shivered, then leaned over the mirror and studied his own eyes. They looked brighter, he thought, as if the invisible doors he painted were slowly opening inside him first. He combed his hair with his fingers, smoothed his shirt, and whispered, "Today, I open doors that no one else can see yet." In the kitchen, he boiled water in his old kettle while the rain dripped from the eaves outside, each droplet landing in the puddles on the cobblestones with a soft plop. He sat at his wooden table, sipping tea slowly, feeling the warmth spread from his hands to his chest, and he visualized the doors he had already painted glowing faintly in the misty streets, whispering prosperity into the town. He pictured the harbor bustling with traders again, cafes full of laughter, and tourists wandering in wonder, all because he dared to paint what others could not see. He finished his tea, tucked a small loaf of bread and a piece of cheese into his satchel along with his brushes and jars of color, and pulled a thin cloak over his shoulders to guard against the drizzle. Then he stepped outside, feeling the soft, wet stones beneath his feet as he walked through the silent streets. The town felt different under the rain. Water trickled along the gutters, reflecting the pale light of the waking sky. A baker swept water from his doorstep, pausing to nod at Elias, who returned a small smile, whispering internally, "Each smile is another door opening." He made his way toward the harbor, where the first two painted doors now shimmered faintly beneath, the raindrops making the colors deeper and more alive. He set his satchel down, wiped the wall gently, and began sketching the outline of the third door. This one, with a tall, arched frame and tiny carved details he imagined in his mind. His brush moved slowly, patiently, each stroke deliberate, as if the rain itself were guiding his hand. A small boy passed by under a tattered umbrella and stopped to watch. "Why do you paint doors that go nowhere?" he asked, his voice innocent but curious. Elias smiled softly, not looking away from his brush, and said, "Sometimes doors go somewhere you can't see yet, but if you believe in them, they open." The boy tilted his head, then laughed, splashing his boots in a puddle before running. Hours passed in this way, the rain slowing to a soft drizzle, and the smell of the sea growing stronger as the tide came in. Elias paused, leaned against the wall, and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cool air kiss his face. Narrator's voice entered softly here, reflective and gentle. There is a secret to life that only the patient discover. The seeds of prosperity are planted in quiet moments, in thoughts repeated gently to oneself, in faith that the invisible will one day be seen. The world rewards those who hold the vision, who believe in doors no one else yet recognizes. By the time the sun finally broke through the clouds, a soft golden light washing over the harbor, Elias's third door glimmered like it belonged to another world. He cleaned his brushes, wrapped them carefully, and stepped back to admire it. He whispered, "Another door, another possibility," and felt something warm stir in his chest, a silent promise that the town was already beginning to change. One invisible door at a time, The morning after the third door had been completed was filled with a soft, golden mist, the kind that draped over the cobblestone streets like a delicate veil. Elias awoke before the first bell of the church rang, his body heavy, but his mind quietly eager. He opened his eyes to the dim light seeping through the small wooden shutters, and for a moment he simply listened to the world. He heard the distant cry of a seagull, the creak of old wood settling in his house, and the faint hum of the ocean greeting the shore. Slowly, he swung his legs off the bed, feeling the cold of the floor against his bare feet, and he reached for his sandals. He slid them on, wriggling his toes against the worn leather, then sat for a moment on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face. He muttered softly, "Another day, another door to open in my heart and in the world." He stretched, his spine popping quietly, and stood, shuffling to the wash basin. He splashed water on his face, blinking against the shock of the cold, then leaned into the mirror again. The faint lines around his eyes told stories of quiet perseverance, and he whispered to his reflection, "Prosperity flows through me, and the world will see it in time." He dressed in his simple shirt and trousers, tying a small sash around his waist. Then he moved to the kitchen. The scent of yesterday's tea still lingered in the wooden room, mixing with the faint salt of the sea that always seemed to cling to the air. He lit the small fire in the stove, placed the kettle on top, and cut a thin slice of bread. While the tea warmed, he sat at his table, chewing slowly, closing his eyes to imagine the doors he would paint today. He saw them in his mind, a door framed in seashells, another surrounded by vines, and another that seemed to shimmer like sunlight on water. He thought to himself, "Each door I paint is a step closer to the life I imagine." By the time he stepped outside, the mist was lifting, revealing the small town awakening. The bakery door creaked open, and the smell of warm bread floated through the streets. A fisherman wheeled a cart of nets toward the harbor, and a black cat darted across Elias's path. He took a deep breath, feeling the freshness of the morning fill his chest, and walked toward the harbor where his doors waited. As he approached, he noticed something unusual. A small group of villagers stood in front of the third door he had painted the day before, whispering to one another. A woman reached out and brushed her hand over the painted arch, smiling faintly, as though she felt something real beneath her fingertips. Elias paused, watched them for a moment, and then continued forward, setting down his satchel with quiet determination. He began preparing the fourth door, this one on a wall near the old lighthouse. He brushed away some loose dust and cobwebs, then sketched the outline of a tall double door with ornate hinges. He dipped his brush into the rich brown paint first, tracing the base carefully, feeling the wood grains in his imagination as though he were crafting them into existence. A soft breeze carried the scent of the ocean and the faint clang of a buoy bell from the distance. Time passed slowly, each stroke of the brush meditative and deliberate. Children passed by, giggling, and one little girl stopped to ask, "Will this door open one day?" Elias smiled and said softly, "It already does, but only for those who believe in it." The girl tilted her head thoughtfully, then skipped away as the sun climbed higher. Elias paused, leaning on his brush and gazing at the horizon where the sea met the sky in a shimmering silver line. The narrator's voice returned here calm, and reflective. True prosperity begins where the world cannot yet see it. The invisible work of the heart, the faith in what is not yet real, and the patience to act as if it already exists. These are the brushstrokes of abundance. Each door he painted was not only a promise to the town, but a commitment to his own inner wealth. By the end of the day, the fourth door gleamed against the old wall, its painted handles catching the soft afternoon light. Elias cleaned his brushes, wiped his hands, and whispered to the wind, "Another door is open." And though the town seemed quiet, something had shifted, as if each invisible door rang a silent bell of opportunity, calling prosperity closer with every stroke. The following morning began with a soft drizzle tapping against the roof tiles of Elias's home, a steady rhythm that lulled the small coastal town into a slower awakening. He stirred under the thin blanket, the cool air brushing against his skin, and for a moment he considered staying in bed. But then he remembered the fifth door waiting for him, and he whispered to himself, "Prosperity doesn't sleep, and neither should I, not in my heart." He swung his legs over the side of the bed, letting his feet find the worn floorboards, and stretched his arms until his shoulders popped gently. He shuffled toward the small wooden window and opened it just enough for the salty breeze to kiss his face. Mist clung to the streets below, and droplets slid down the cobblestones like silver veins. He washed his face at the basin, combed his fingers through his hair, and studied his reflection in the little mirror, clouded with age and tiny scratches. He saw the same eyes as yesterday, but maybe, just maybe, there was a new light behind them. He nodded slowly, murmuring, "Another door, another world." He dressed carefully, tying his scarf around his neck to keep out the morning chill, and lit a small fire to warm a piece of bread and boil water for tea. As he ate in silence, he stared at the wall where his own sketches hung dreams of doors that had not yet met the world, each one holding a whisper of what could be. He chewed slowly, letting the rhythm of his breath match the patter of the rain. By the time he stepped outside, the drizzle had softened to a delicate mist, wrapping the village in a gray embrace. He carried a satchel of brushes and paints along the quiet streets, past shuttered shops, and the old fountain that trickled faintly in the square. When he reached the harbor wall where he had chosen to paint the fifth door, he paused, savoring the view. Fishing boats rocked gently in the tide, their wet wood gleaming, and the lighthouse loomed faintly in the distance like a guardian of Kata. Secrets. He set down his tools and began to prepare the wall, brushing away droplets and tracing the outline of his next door. This one would be tall and narrow, framed with painted seashells and curling vines, like a portal to a secret underwater world. As he worked, he hummed softly to himself, the kind of tune that keeps your heart company. Hours passed in a blur of color and motion, interrupted only by small breaks where he leaned against the wall to stretch his back and gaze at the sea. Occasionally, he whispered his affirmations, the ones that had become his invisible companions. Opportunities flow to me. My art opens doors in the world. Prosperity comes softly, like the tide. He noticed a boy lingering nearby, watching him with wide eyes, and the boy asked, "Why do you paint doors where no one can go?" Elias chuckled quietly and replied, "Sometimes the doors are not for your feet, but for your mind. Walk through here." He tapped his temple, and the world will follow. By late afternoon, the fifth door was complete, its painted vines appearing to sway in the breeze, the shells glistening as if real droplets clung to them. A few villagers had gathered, murmuring to each other with curiosity. One woman, carrying a basket of fish, stopped and touched the wall. "It feels live," she said softly, though she wasn't sure why. And in that quiet moment, Elias felt his heart swell with a subtle joy, knowing that his work was stirring something unseen. In their minds, the narrator's voice flowed gently here, like the sea itself. True abundance begins in the invisible spaces of your thoughts, like Elias painting doors for a world that cannot yet enter. You are always creating the unseen gateways of your life. When you choose faith over fear, patience over doubt, the doors appear, and life begins to step through them. As dusk fell, and the first street lamps flickered to life, Elias packed his brushes, feeling the ache in his arms and the warmth in his soul. He whispered to the evening air, "Another door opens," and walked slowly home, the sound of the tide following him, like a quiet promise. The night had rained softly, and by morning the entire town seemed wrapped in a glistening veil. Elias stirred slowly in his small bed, listening to the droplets sliding down the roof and the distant cries of gulls greeting the pale dawn. He blinked twice before sitting up, stretching his arms toward the wooden ceiling beams, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders from the long hours of painting the day before. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, letting his bare feet touch the cool floorboards, and paused to breathe in the scent of damp earth and salt from the sea. He whispered to himself, "Another day, another door, another invisible path for the heart to walk." He shuffled to the small mirror by the basin, the glass slightly fogged by the cold. He splashed his face with water, feeling the shock wake him fully, and leaned closer to study the soft lines around his eyes. He thought of them not as marks of age, but as traces of every dream he had ever dared to imagine. He dried his face with a rough cloth and began his quiet routine, pulling on his trousers, buttoning his shirt slowly, knotting the scarf around his neck to keep the chill away. He slipped on his old boots, worn but sturdy, and then brushed a bit of dust from the sleeves of his coat. He stepped into the small kitchen and boiled water, the kettle rattling softly on the fire. He prepared tea and a slice of bread with a smear of honey, sitting by the window to watch the mist roll over the cobblestone streets. Every bite, every sip, he took slowly, as if the rhythm of slowness itself was painting the day. He whispered his affirmations between mouthfuls, like secret prayers only the walls could hear. Prosperity is blooming within me. Opportunities are walking toward me. I am surrounded by invisible doors that open in perfect time. When he finally stepped outside, the town was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it is listening. He walked through the streets, his boots echoing softly, and every painted door he had created seemed to greet him silently. He reached the sixth wall, a curved section near the old bakery, its stone mottled with age and moss. He stood there for a long moment, brushing his fingers along the cold surface, imagining the door he would create today. This one would be different, arched, like the entrance to a secret garden, with faint golden light spilling from invisible cracks, as if someone had left the world of abundance just on the other side. He set down his satchel, arranged his brushes in careful order, and began to paint the outline. The morning stretched into afternoon, in a rhythm of color, motion, and breath. He layered shades of deep blue for the door's panels, soft greens for the curling ivy, and subtle glimmers of gold for the hints of light that made the invisible feel almost real. From time to time, he leaned back, brushing his hands on his coat, watching the door slowly emerge. Passersby slowed to glance at his work. Some smiled politely, others frowned, unsure what to make of it. A young woman approached and said softly, "I feel lighter when I walk past your doors. I can't explain it." Leah smiled warmly and said, "You don't have to explain it. Just walk through it in your heart." The narrator's voice entered softly, almost like the wind weaving between the stones. Prosperity does not announce itself loudly. It grows quietly, like vines curling on walls, like golden light seeping from invisible doors. Every positive thought, every grateful breath, every silent moment of faith. These are the brushstrokes of the life you will soon walk into. As the sun began to sink, painting the horizon with lavender and soft orange, Elias added the final touches, a swirl of gold on the arch, and stepped back. The sixth door glowed in the fading light, not with real fire or magic, but with the quiet energy of belief. He packed his brushes slowly, feeling the warmth of contentment in his chest, and whispered, "Another door opened today, even if the world can't yet see it." Then he walked home under the rising moon, the sea whispering to him all the way. The next morning arrived with a golden glow over the coastal town, as if the world itself had decided to honor the quiet work Elias had been doing for weeks. He stirred in bed with a deep sigh, rolling onto his back and staring at the wooden beams of his small ceiling. The faint cry of gulls and the rhythmic pulse of the sea filled the room. He took his time to rise, stretching slowly, letting his feet touch the floor as he whispered to himself, "Another day of abundance waiting to be painted into existence." He washed his face with the cool water from the basin, his reflection in the small mirror smiling back at him, and he paused for a long moment to notice the calmness in his own eyes. He buttoned his shirt, wrapped the scarf around his neck, and laced his boots, savoring each deliberate movement as if it was a ceremony of gratitude. Outside, the streets were damp from the night dew, and the scent of the sea mingled with the faint aroma of fresh bread from the bakery. Elias walked slowly, breathing deeply, and approached the line of doors he had created. All 6 of them stood silently, painted on stone and brick, yet they felt alive, as though whispering to anyone who passed, "Your life is full of openings you have not yet seen." He touched the latest one gently with his fingertips, and then moved to a new wall he had chosen, a forgotten wall at the edge of the pier, where the waves could almost kiss the stone during high tide. He unpacked his brushes, placed them carefully on a cloth, and sat for a moment, closing his eyes to visualize the 7th door. This one would be wide and radiant, like a doorway into possibility itself. As he painted through the morning and into the afternoon, the town began to shift. More visitors wandered through the streets, pointing at his doors and taking photographs. Shopkeepers smiled more. A fisherman stopped to say that for the first time in months, the sea had been generous. A woman said she felt hope each time she walked past his doors, as though they reminded her that better days were just beyond her reach, waiting. Elias nodded quietly and kept painting, each stroke a silent affirmation. Opportunities flow to me. Life opens doors for me in perfect timing. Prosperity blooms around me and through me. By the time the sun began to set, the seventh door shimmered in the golden light. Elias cleaned his brushes slowly, letting the salty wind dry the last bits of paint. He sat on a stone bench, looking at all the doors he had painted, lined like quiet guardians of faith. His chest filled with a warmth he could not fully explain, a sense that he had not just painted walls, but had painted invisible paths in the minds and hearts of everyone who had passed. Then, the narrator's voice rose gently, wrapping the listener in a cocoon of reflection. Prosperity does not always begin where the eye can see. It starts as a seed in your heart, in your thoughts, in your quiet whispers of belief. Like Elias, you have doors waiting for you, doors that no one else can see until you dare to paint them in your mind. Every time you say to yourself, "I am open to abundance," a door forms. Every time you feel gratitude for what you already have, a key appears. And every time you trust that life is ready to give to you, those doors open, silently and perfectly, bringing opportunities, blessings, and joy. Take a deep breath now. Let your mind see your own invisible doors. See them shining, waiting for you. With each calm breath, repeat silently, "I allow prosperity into my life. I see the doors opening. I am ready to receive." Let your heart believe this truth, and notice how your body relaxes, your thoughts soften, and your inner world begins to glow with possibility. And now, as we end this story, I ask you, are you still awake? If you are, leave a comment saying, "I am still awake." But if your eyes are closing, if your breathing is slow, if your heart is at peace, then let the invisible doors of your dreams open as you drift into the soft, abundant night. If you are still awake, stay with me, because another story is about to begin